Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Sanjeev Bikhchandani, and I'm going to be moderating this session. And I'm not going to introduce the speakers. I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about themselves. Yeah. So, Amit, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about your life story. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you everyone for this opportunity. So my startup is interesting. It's in a GovTech field. Its name is EasyGov. So I worked as a government consultant for around a decade with Accenture Management Consulting and KPMG. In fact, straight from the college, I started my own company, but that didn't succeed. I ran it for a year and then get into the consulting. In the consulting, I worked from Nagaland to Bihar to remote districts in UP and later on Japan.
तो consulting में क्या करते थे आप?
So consulting में, being a management consultant, we used to get a government problem. Like for example, in India, when we were working liquidation,
how to problem है? तो कौन सा problem solve किया आपने?
So I would say solve करने में, I think one that is favorite to me is empowerment of Panchayati Raj institution.
Okay.
So that was one of the favorite, and second was never came into the life. But I was a founding consultant for NetGrid, National Intelligence Grid. Okay. That was formed post Mumbai attack.
Okay. So, boss, what is the difference between being a consultant and being an entrepreneur? मतलब कि क्या फर्क लगा आपको यहाँ पे?
Huge, right? So, giving a gyan versus delivering it, they are completely different game. So, I would say the difference is huge.
So, which is easier? Which is easier?
Obviously, consulting.
Okay. Okay. Kartik, can you tell us a little bit about your life story here, your background?
Yeah. So, I was mostly into technology, and in technology,
so just one second. So he is 40 years old, and you are 35. Yeah.
Right.
Carry on.
Yeah. So when I was working in technology space, creating solutions around AI and ML, I used to have a big problem trying to get the right talent for AI because, as you know, Naukri.com पे तो सब डाल देते हैं कि I know AI, computer vision, NLP. But when you do interviews, really they don't know it. So how do you really train people for future skills? Because everybody talks about, AI, ML going to be the future, but nobody is training those people. So that's how I got into this business of DcodeAI, wherein we wanted to train and upskill young people on this 21st century future skills. And then obviously we scaled it up and got acquired.
So your company was a tech company, which got acquired, and you're there for the next X number of months or years
right.
as a earn-out, and then you'll see what to do. And you may stay on?
I would want to go deep into, because when we talk about technologies like AI, IoT or metaverse, these are very, big terms, right? But if you go deep drill into them within AI also,
and this is your second startup.
That's right.
So you are a serial entrepreneur, and maybe you'll do a third startup. Possibly. We don't know.
Absolutely.
And you also done 2 startups and done consulting.
Yeah, consulting then startup.
A consulting and startup, and your startup been acquired recently by Reliance.
Yeah, Reliance Jio. Jio platform acquired us in 2019.
And what exactly, so you're in EdTech, what exactly does your startup do?
GovTech, so I will put it in a one line. So there we spend 19 lakh crore every year on social protection. That means for health, housing, education, food. There is a 30% of error of exclusion. So people don't get food, people don't get house, though the taxpayer money expenditure is very high. So we try to cut down the error of exclusion without increasing the budget. That means we have to reduce the error of inclusion using artificial intelligence.
So basically you help people get money from government schemes that they're entitled to.
Right. We help government to find right beneficiaries and give them the benefit.
Got it.
Mic check, 1, 2.
Got it. Rahul, what is your background, boss?
So I graduated from IIT Kanpur Electronics. So I've had 3 phases of my career journey. 10 years in semiconductor industry. I was building systems, algorithms for wireless LAN, cellular phones, XDSL, voice over IP. That was the first 10 year of journey. Then 5 years spent with Google, running Asia, many of the roles, business units and strategy and operations. And then 2015, I started Moglix. And Moglix, we are a e-commerce for manufacturing and infrastructure sector. We work with companies across automotive, chemical, pharma, steel, mining, and we become one-stop solution for all their procurement that they are doing. Just like we would imagine a consumer ecosystem buying everything from Flipkart or Amazon, we become that for manufacturing organization.
Got it. And you are a unicorn.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so boss, guys, there's one unicorn on stage. and it is there, right? Hey, Sid.
Hi, Sanjeev. Yes.
Hi,
Can you
good, we
hear
can
me?
hear you. Sorry, somebody said something. No. A unicorn by definition has to be an unlisted company. Definition. Okay, that's the definition. I said we can hear you now. Good. Welcome.
Perfect, Sanjeev. Huh? That's great.
Okay.
Likewise.
So Sid runs 314 Capital, and he's a VC investor. So Sid, how many startups have you invested in your life, in your family office, 314 Capital, in your personal capacity, total?
We've done over about 100 startups now,
100
Sanjeev.
startups.
So there are about 80 plus startups from the 314 stable itself, and then personally to the family office, etc. We've done about 20 plus startups.
And this is over what time period?
This is from about 2015 to about 2022.
So
Correct.
over 100 startups in the last 7 years, Sid
Yes,
and
sir.
314 Capital and the family office invested in. So Sid, what's your take on this 107 unicorn number? Is it a number we should tout, or how many of this is liquidity driven? How many of these would have been unicorns would had the Fed not pumped in $5 trillion post COVID?
I think, Sanjeev, see, all the actions taken by the Fed and all the central banks have essentially accelerated the path that India was already on currently. If you look at the period between 2017 and 2019 as well, Indian startups have actually amassed a large amount of capital, and India was well on its path to actually becoming the third largest startup ecosystem in the world itself. Not just in terms of the amount of capital raised, but in terms of the ingenuity as well as the startups that the country has actually engendered as of now. So it is an extremely strong story. I think what the liquidity and despite the current liquidity situation actually being retracted by all the central banks worldwide, India still actually holds on to this third largest startup ecosystem itself. In fact, we've actually seen the stats as of now. The early stage funding, which is the greatest barometer for optimism in the private equity and venture capital space, that's actually increased by a factor of 44% year on year compared to the previous year itself. So despite the doom and gloom situation that we're seeing as of now, the fundamentals of the Indian startup ecosystem still actually end up remaining strong, and global asset allocators as well as investors are still looking at India as a one bright spot in the entire situation of gloom and doom that the world is actually going through currently.
So what I hear from you is that, listen, I mean, the absolute valuation does not matter. Point is that India is the third largest startup ecosystem, and in this gloom and doom scenario globally, we are doing relatively well. So a lot of it is relative, actually, right?
That's it.
Okay, great. So now, tell me, Sid, from your knowledge and experience and 100 startups, why are startups important to the Indian economy, and what's going to happen? What difference will these startups make?
Man, I think that's actually a fantastic good question, Sanjeev. So startups, according to me, are not actually a recent phenomenon. We've had entrepreneurship as part of this country itself for a very long period of time, and we've actually seen that accelerate since 1991 and since about 2013, 2014 onwards, where the government actually started putting a lot more, I would say, the policy weight behind startups itself. Now, the role of startups in the economy is actually manifold. The first and foremost is actually in terms of new asset creation. The entire job of a startup is to actually become the nucleus of an economic engine that can actually end up compounding over time through the application of capital as well as the application of innovation when it comes to solving real world solutions itself. The second role of a startup is actually in terms of a change maker. Now, as all of us know, innovation always happens at the edge. It's extremely hard to have large scale innovation actually happen within the confines of much larger institutions themselves. Most of the inherent processes and risk management actually prevent them from taking the kind of risks that are actually needed to actually foster innovation as part of that itself. So startups become the sort of nucleus of innovation that happens at the edge, and slowly from the edge it actually bleeds onto the main core economy itself. The third most important role that startups actually play is in terms of job creation as well as enabling economic development. Now, this is actually key. If you actually look at it now, the jobs that most engineers, most MBAs actually aspire to as of now didn't actually exist 10 years ago itself. Companies such as Moglix, that Rahul actually runs, didn't actually exist at that particular point in time. Now, if you go to any of the B school campuses or anyone, as you've seen, most of the people graduating are actually gravitating towards these kind of companies as opposed to some of the legacy companies that have actually been inhabiting India for a long period of time itself. So we've seen new asset creation, we've seen economic development, as well as seen innovation at the edge. These are the sort of flagship I would say responsibility that the entire startup ecosystem actually bears on behalf of the entire nation. And the other important thing is, most of these, since this is the new age economy, the role of this particular ecosystem is only going to compound over time. We're actually going to see Indian companies and Indian entrepreneurs solve uniquely Indian situations. And for this, in this entire decade, is actually going to be the decade that India can actually solve these problems, not just for India alone, but for the rest of the world as well. There's a very old saying that we keep actually speaking about here at 314. If Silicon Valley can actually end up building for the first 1 billion internet users, it's only going to be India that's going to build for the remaining 6 billion people who are slowly coming online itself. So that's a mantra that we have, and this is a mantle that Indian startups need to achieve.
Thanks, Sid. Which time zone are you in? East Coast or West Coast?
West Coast as of now. So it's about 4:30 odd in the morning.
So what's the time there?
4:30 in the morning.
4:30 in the morning.
4:30 in the morning.
Sid, thanks so much. We'll come back to you. Stay online. We'll come back to you. But thanks so
Will do.
much for waking up at 4:30 to speak to us.
Anytime.
Yeah. So Amit, I'll come back to you. Boss, what do you want to do in life? आपकी dream क्या है? तमन्ना क्या है? What is your aspiration?
So I put like a vision of my company to make social protection family-centric and progressive. Progressive for people, progressive for economy, and progressive for nation.
So you're currently working with 3 states, right?
Right now we're working with 3 states.
Which 3 states?
So we're working with Karnataka, we're working with Tripura and Assam.
So how many people's lives do you think your solutions have made a difference to over the last N number of years?
So let me put it in this way. We are also available on a MyGov, on a EasyGov. So there we empower every day 2 lakh to 1 million people every day.
Every day. तो एक साल में कितने हो जाएंगे? Unique people.
Unique count would be around, I think we have crossed 5 million.
In a year?
In a year.
And you've been doing this for how many years?
So I'm doing it for last 7 years. So, but the real impact has started coming in after 2019.
After you got taken over by Reliance.
Right, because there was a huge tech investment that was required.
Okay. So, and how many people do you hope to impact 10 years from now?
Yeah, so I think I would like to put up another number with the government of Karnataka. That is, we dispersed 50 crore last month to the people who really need it. And we are aiming to increase this number to somewhere around 1,500 crore in 3 to 4 months.
With the government of Karnataka?
With government of Karnataka.
Only one state?
Only one state.
So if you go national, you will make a huge impact.
Yeah, national expenditure on social protection is 19 lakh crore.
Got it. So you are making a difference and you will make a bigger difference going forward. And so that's your aspiration.
That's my aspiration.
कि
Correct.
आपको लोगों की जिंदगी बेहतर बनानी है गरीबों की
लोगों की जिंदगी और कंट्री श्रीलंका नहीं बननी चाहिए वो भी इंपॉर्टेंट है सो वी शुड नॉट गॉट ओवरबोर्ड विद सोशल प्रोटेक्शन सो वी हैव टू पुट अ चेक ऑन दैट एज वेल
got it. And Kartik, what is your dream, your aspiration? क्या करना चाहते हो आप?
So my aspiration is to actually democratize learning of future skills for everybody. So any average Joe on the street can also learn these future skills because right now I did this project with Navjyoti Foundation with more than 10,000 kids. Kiran Bedi ji, that NGO she runs. And the initial thought was, oh, these category of kids can only learn basic data entry operator. They cannot learn AIML. Those are very advanced skills. We proved that wrong over 1 year.
So how did you teach them AIML? क्या कराया आपने?
So we teach them basic concepts like supervised learning, unsupervised learning, how basic data.
And what is the background of these children?
So these children, most of them have only one device at home. They haven't used computer.
Which is shared by the whole family?
Yes.
Okay.
So we taught them in a simple DIY format. We created the entire platform in Hindi for them.
Okay.
So that they can learn Python libraries and everything in Hindi. We created an environment for them in Hindi.
Okay.
In which they can
But
combine.
now, how will these skills be useful to them in life?
So right now, if you see most of the job opportunities, like people are saying that for skills like AI, India will again be the back office of the world, where the entire data labeling for supervised learning will happen in India, tagging will happen in India, iteration and test trained data, everything will happen in India. So we need people who can do that. And why only people who have fancy degrees from big colleges? Why not anybody, can be empowered to learn those skills?
Got it. But the thing you've done with Python libraries in Hindi, is it easy to scale and replicate and take national, or is it something which requires a lot of effort and high touch to actually scale up?
No, so the first time the effort was higher, but now we are looking to create more vernacular content in these areas. So first time was hard, but now we understand how it works.
But ultimately, if you're serving the world, you will need to know English, right? Or you can do it in local language.
See, it depends. I mean, in India, for example, in K-12, almost 40% population learns in their native language content. They don't learn in English or Hindi. So if you want to create something like they say for Bharat, you really need to go local in their
I
language.
understand
Otherwise, you will
that,
miss
but
out.
if you're back office to the world for AIML, तो आपको इंग्लिश में कोडिंग करनी पड़ेगी कि you can do it with local
So
language?
there are libraries available in which you can translate also, right? I mean, you compile the code in Hindi English and it converts vice versa and compiles it.
Got it. So you're saying this is scalable and it can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Got it. Got it. And what is the status of this project? Is it going to go national? Are you going to scale it?
So we've already done this project at a small scale with 10,000 kids, but now we are scaling up with other large foundations. A lot of global foundations are interested.
But there is no revenue model or profit here, right? It has to be funded by grants.
No, so, absolutely. So this is not the only thing we do, but the idea is we work with schools also, directly B2C customers as well. But the mission is that we also make it inclusive so that everybody can learn AI. Obviously at a discounted price for them, but we don't want them to miss out on it. So the
Got it.
larger mission, since you asked, is to democratize learning of these skills for everybody.
Got it. Got it. Got it. And Rahul, आपकी कंपनी कितनी दूर जाएगी और आप कहाँ तक ले जाना चाहते हो?
So I'll answer it in two parts. I think the zoom out view of what do I want to achieve or why did I start the company? I think, can we take this manufacturing sector from 400 billion to $1 trillion sector? And the zoom in view is how can we enable that process to accelerate, whether it is from a sales function, whether it is from procurement, whether it is from supply chain financing, both on a domestic market basis or India to the world basis. So I think that is a dream, and I think that is achievable today in the current times. So I think काफी लंबी रेस है.
And China Plus One is helping you. China Plus One is helping you.
I think it is just starting to give tailwinds. बाकी तो opportunity तो इंडिया के पास कमी नहीं रहेगी. हम कितना use कर पाएंगे, that is the key. So I think next 5 years are key. If we are able to capitalize this unique moment in time, I think we can truly become a relevant China Plus One, because I think we have been far too long irrelevant into the global supply chain. I think we have a chance to become a relevant player in the global supply chain.
Thank you. So Sid, I don't know if you're able to catch all the comments, but we have over here 3 startups, 3 entrepreneurs who've done stuff, are doing stuff. They have dreams and aspirations of national impact, global impact. They're making a difference. But to enable them and other startups and other entrepreneurs, what are the policy measures that need to change, if any? What are the things the government can do to facilitate this going forward, according to you?
I think that's actually a fantastic question, Sanjeev. I would actually like to break this into 2 parts. One is in terms of actually enabling startups to truly actually go global. The second part is in terms of actually increasing the amount of rupee capital that ends up actually playing in this entire space itself. Now, for Indian startups to actually go truly global, we need to reduce the sort of friction elements that exist within the ecosystem itself, especially from a regulatory perspective. That actually causes, number one, a number of our companies to actually leave the shores of India and go to, let's say, the US when it comes to SaaS, to Singapore or any of these other nations to actually for fintech, e-commerce, and all these other roles itself. The most important elements that I actually see over there are making sure that they're actually placed on an equal footing compared to their counterparts globally itself. Now, India is actually unique in terms of a startup ecosystem, wherein all our entrepreneurs and our startups from day one actually need to start competing on a global scale itself. China is actually unique in the sense that it gatekeeps a number of companies that end up actually entering the country itself. So it allows time for homegrown heroes such as Alibaba, Baidu, Tencent, ByteDance, etc., to actually incubate within the country, become fairly large, and then to actually go overseas. Whereas you look at the US, the entire complex between venture capital, between industry, between academia and government is actually a fairly well-known nexus as of now. And because of the large amount of capital that's actually available, the ability for them to actually amass capital and then to actually go on to conquer Europe, go on to conquer Latin America, and then make an India play as well is actually extremely strong. Whereas India, you're actually competing from day one against the likes of your Google, your Amazon, your Facebook, and all these other companies itself, all these other global giants. I think the most important thing is reduce the barriers of friction that they have, be it in terms of actually enabling Indian companies or Indian startups to actually start maintaining accounts in USD to allow easier SaaS payments to actually end up happening, easing the friction in terms of M&A as well. All the M&A that's actually driven in the country right now has to be done with the blessings of the NCLT. Whereas you look at the US, you look at Singapore for that matter, M&A can actually happen the moment they actually follow a simple objective test itself. And this gives them sort of tax advantages, that they have compared to going through the entire NCLT or the code process itself. The third element that I think actually becomes very important is in terms of actually fostering an exit environment as well, is to actually allow some of these startups to actually end up listing overseas. Even though it seems counterintuitive right about now to allow Indian startups to actually list overseas, allowing market competition to actually come into the exit process itself will ensure that the efficiencies that's actually needed in the system can actually end up accelerating to a very large extent, and Indian startups can actually choose to actually IPO anywhere in the world, despite actually being domiciled in India itself. That's actually a key advantage that happens. Lastly, when it comes to the rupee capital ecosystem, I personally believe that Indian rupee capital has actually been suppressed in the private equity and venture capital space for an inordinately large amount of time. All of us have seen the issues with regard to angel tax, where systematically the government actually prevented rupee capital from actually coming into Indian startups, and we personally lost, I would say, 3 to 4 generations of entrepreneurs who've actually chosen to go overseas rather than remain in India itself. And similar, how we've seen the Indian markets, the listed markets actually stay afloat during this particular time of carnage during this year. The Indian capital markets actually have what I call the mutual fund moment, where there was a large enough infrastructure built in to actually sustain the flow of rupee capital at a point in time when dollars were actually leaving the country itself. But as we look at it as of now, we need to have a mutual fund moment when it comes to Indian startups as well. Such that during a time as what we're going through as of now, where global allocation, where liquidity is actually being sucked out of the entire ecosystem, dollars are actually choosing to go back to the US as opposed to being invested into emerging markets like India, we actually need rupee capital to actually come back in and to actually plug that particular gap itself. For this, the entire alternative investment fund structure, it's a fantastic set of regulations by SEBI, but the appurtenant parts that actually exist in terms of taxation, in terms of ease of operations, etc., needs to actually come in, such that institutional flow of capital can actually start coming to Indian startups. And the moment that happens, we have a strong enough ecosystem for us to actually start compounding internally. And that is truly the way in which India can actually become Atmanirbhar. It's not just in terms of ecosystem, in terms of startup ecosystem, but also in terms of rupee capital participation as well. If that actually happens, this can actually become India's decade itself. And India can actually deliver upon the long-standing promise that it's actually beholden to the rest of the world itself.
So if I were to summarize what you said, there's a whole bunch of stuff around policy, regulation, rules, which are going to impact capital flows, especially from India, within India, right? Which can make a huge difference. If the government takes cognizance of this, then it can give a further impetus to the startup movement in India.
Thank you, Mr. Bikhchandani, Mr. Sharma, Mr. Garg, Mr. Shukla, and Mr. Pai for joining us today and sharing your views. May I request Director General AIMA, Ms. Rekha Sethi, to present the mementos to the esteemed speakers.